Welcome to our talk, Leave No Data Behind, Empirical Insights into Data Erasure from Online Services. My name is Emmanuel Syrmoudis. I'm a PhD student at the Technical University of Munich, and this study is a joint work with Eduard Rupp and Grossklags, who are also at the Technical University of Munich. In 2018, the General Data Protection Regulation came into force in the European Union, and it introduced a set of user rights that aim to give users more control over their data. This study focuses on the right to erasure, also known as the right to be forgotten. It allows users to request the erasure of their personal data from online services. We already know from empirical studies on other user rights that the compliance of online services with regard to user rights of the GDPR is in general rather low. For instance, in 2021, we conducted an empirical study on the right to data portability, where we found a compliance rate of only 29% of online services who fulfill all the requirements of the right to data portability. So we're now asking, with regard to the right to erasure, how do data controllers deal with data erasure in practice, and what are the implications for data subjects? To answer this main research question, we look into different aspects of data erasure. We first look into what kind of data can users of websites easily delete within their accounts without deleting the complete account. Then under what circumstances and in which ways can users exercise their right to erasure? Is the request of an account deletion within the account, for instance via pressing a button, equivalent to sending the data protection officer a formal right to erasure request? Then how do the data controllers respond to this data deletion requests? And finally, what kind of data remains after a successful data deletion request? We can't cover all of these questions within this short talk, so I will focus on the main findings of the study. So to give you some more background, Article 17 of the GDPR allows users to have their personal data deleted from online services under certain circumstances. That is, for instance, if that data is not needed anymore for processing payments or something like that. In addition, GDPR also features Article 6, the lawfulness of processing, which restricts services to only process data when the user has given consent or the processing is necessary for other purposes. So, when it comes to the right to erasure, in contrast to other user rights, we could not directly observe whether services are compliant with this right or not. So for the right to data portability, one can simply request the export of the data and then look into the data export if it fulfills all the requirements. We of course can't look into the servers of the online services, so we had to go with a more of an exploratory approach here. So to collect as much information as possible on the data erasure practices of online services, we went for a two-stage process. In the first stage, we created accounts at 90 popular online services, which were taken from the SimilarWeb ranking. We used SimilarWeb in order to have accounts at a variety of different types of services. Then, over a period of 6 weeks, we manually feeded data into these accounts to make sure that each of the accounts features a rich variety of data that can then later hopefully be deleted. Then, after at least 6 weeks, we requested the data erasure from the online service. We tried to make this as similar to as a normal user would do. So when we found a dedicated button for this data erasure, which for instance could be called delete account or something similar, we used that button or a request form. If there was no button or request form, we sent an email with a formal request under Article 17 GDPR to request the erasure of our personal data. So after this process was done, we waited for 6 months or even longer, so we made sure that at least 6 months were gone. We then requested an export of our data under Article 15 GDPR, which is the right of access. So this right gives the user the right to receive the information the service has about them. So requested to get this copy of our data and then looked into it to see, is there data remaining that should have been deleted before. To gain even more insights, we sent follow-up emails to the services that did not delete or anonymize all data correctly. We analyzed the privacy policies of the services on information about the data deletion process, and we sent a questionnaire to all data protection officers of the services in the sample. The graph on this slide shows the cumulative distribution of total deletion times. That is the time from the initial request until the data was finally deleted. All but 3 of the 90 services responded to our erasure requests. From the 3 services that did not respond, 2 erased the data anyway. But of course, these services are not included in the graph, as we cannot say how long the erasure exactly took. So we found that around 50% of services erased the data on the day of the request. The mean deletion time in our sample was 10.8 days. Notably, for 28% of services, there was a transition period after we requested the erasure, which was between 7 and 90 days. 19 services explicitly stated that within this transition period, the erasure can be cancelled. For instance, such cancellation can take place by logging into the account, and then the erasure is automatically cancelled. This table gives an overview of our results. We found 3 different ways in which services could violate the terms of Article 17. First, there were services which still sent us a newsletter after the account was deleted. Note that we never separately signed up for a newsletter, but indicated our interest in receiving a newsletter by, for instance, by a check mark within the account. Then there were instances where public data was not deleted or anonymized. So where possible, we created public posts or tweets or whatever. And then after the erasure, found that, for instance, for all services, for 27% of services, this public data was not sufficiently deleted or anonymized. That is, for instance, our name was still over it. Then there were services where we received a positive response to our Article 15 requests. So these were the requests under the right of access. So these services still responded with our personal data more than 6 months after we made the erasure request. All in all, we find that for 73% of services that they could be marked as compliant. So we could not find non-compliant behavior of these services. 18% of services where there was the possibility to sign up for a newsletter still sent us a newsletter. 27% of services where we could create public posts did not delete or anonymize that posts, and 16% of all services sent us a positive Article 15 request. Notably is the difference in request methods. As stated earlier, where possible, we requested the erasure by the click of a button, and only if that was not possible, we sent an email with a formal Article 17 request. We found that only 69% of services where the button was used for the erasure are compliant, whereas 82% where we submitted a request where we submitted a formal request using an email were compliant. So this leads to a significant difference in request methods. Regarding the country or the popularity of services, we could not find significant differences. As seen in the table, there is a significant difference between data erasure which is requested via the click of a button versus the erasure which is requested via a formal Article 17 request, where the non-compliance rates are 31% and 18% respectively. This leads to the question, should these types of data erasure via a button and erasure via a formal request, be treated in the same way? We asked this question the data protection officers and received mixed answers. Some explicitly said, yes, to use your rights under Article 17, please use the erasure method that is given within your account. Others said, no, we don't treat this in the same way. We also analyzed the privacy policies, but they mostly contain no details on the deletion process, that is, what data will exactly be deleted when making this request. So one argument in favor of treating this the same is that from a user's perspective, users typically will use that buttons. So if they aren't treated in the same way, online services have the incentive to offer that buttons in order to be able to keep more data, which goes against the intentions of the GDPR. In addition, GDPR also features its Article 6, which forbids processing without consent unless necessary, and one could argue that when a user requests the erasure of their account, then this might be interpreted also as revoking his or her consent to the data processing. So to wrap up, we find that at least 27% of online services are not compliant with the provisions of GDPR's Article 17, right to erasure. In particular, we find that there is a high heterogeneity in the practices of online services. This makes it difficult for users to execute their rights, and in addition, in most cases, users receive no information on the scope of the erasure. So we propose two improvements. On the one hand, services should receive guidelines by the legislator on how to implement this right to erasure, and this regulation should be enforced more strictly. Then from a user's perspective, data erasure, the methods for data erasure requests should be accessible more easily, and services should be obliged to provide more information about the process itself. So that concludes our talk. Thank you very much for your attention.